everyone, it's me, Samantha, and this is Power Podcast. Hello everyone, this is Sam and welcome back to Power Up Podcast. Today we have someone very special, a name that has been mentioned time and time again within previous episodes. We have none other than Harry Pozycki. You might know him as the GOAT, you might know him as H-Dog. I've mentioned him countless amount of times in various aliases. Harry, together with his wife, is the founder of the Citizens Service. In his youth, he founded a law firm of experts in land use and housing law and dedicated half of his time to pro bono work as a strategic advisor to governors of both parties on housing and planning legislation. Harry left the firm in 1996 to lead the Citizen Service as a full-time volunteer and develop and gain adoption of major legislation to reduce the power of political party bosses and increase citizen power in government decision-making. Harry, how are you?
Doing fine, and thank you for that lovely introduction.
I'm really excited to have you here today. Like I mentioned, your name dropped like in every other episode, and I feel like you've been like kind of like the Phantom of the Opera of the Power Up podcast. So now everyone has a face to the name, and I hope you're excited to be here.
Well, with a name like Pozycki, it's a heavy name to drop, you know?
All right, so as usual, I'm going to start off with our tried and true question. What does powering up mean to you?
Well, Sam, since I've had the benefit of watching some of your Power Up episodes, I'll tell you what it means to me by way of a story. It's where I learned to power up. You see, I was a student in college and volunteering, teaching reading at the State Reform School, and I noticed that they were grouping children who were just truants in the same cell blocks with children who were there for serious crimes. And I went to the head of the reform school and said, why don't you divide them up? You can help both, but at least the ones who are just in there for truancy or something of that sort aren't going to be trained by the elder students to be more advanced criminals. And he said, thought it was a good idea. We implemented it, and we started to see the recidivism rate, the rate by which children who are released from the reform school get arrested again and come back again. That was dropping rather precipitously. So one day he came and he said to me, would you like to accompany me to the state legislature? They're having a budget hearing on the reform school. Now, I had no political background at all, none whatsoever. We did get a load of coal every Christmas from the local political party and occasionally a turkey on Thanksgiving, but that's all I knew about politics. Had no family connections. But he takes me there, and the budget committee listens to the idea, and they say, we don't have enough money for these punk kids, hardly have enough money to take our own kids to the ball game. And I was just incensed, and not for the reasons you might think. I didn't expect the legislators to have empathy for the juveniles. I came from a kind of a background where I did, but they may not have had exposure. But I thought that they could at least do math, that they could figure out that if you were dropping the recidivism rate, you were dropping the incarceration and parole costs. And even if you were just worrying about taxes and nothing else, it'd be a good idea. I came home to my then soon-to-be bride, who helped me found the Citizen Service, and she started to instruct me even then and has been ever since. But what she said is, you can't expect that a solution, just because it's a good or a just solution, is going to self-effect. And I said, well, what do I do? She said, you're going to have to learn law and politics and government. In other words, she was telling me that I had to learn political power before I got into policy. Power precedes policy. It doesn't benefit anyone to dream up great policies if you don't have the power to get them enacted and implemented. Mm-hmm. So we've been at it for over 50 years since that time, and been working together with a number of experts in local government power, former mayors, former city attorneys, administrators, school board presidents, superintendents, people who exercise power on the local level. And we put together a training that my wife told me I had to get. Took me 50 years, but now you can get it in an hour and a half. in a training that we call a leadership and no blame problem solving. And, they're 10 videos, 10-minute segments, so you can take it 10 minutes at a time. At the end of it, you'll get a certificate from Rutgers or other colleges, a certificate of training in leadership and no blame problem solve. But more importantly, you won't make the mistake that I made trying to come up with a policy without getting the power first.
Yeah. So it sounds like powering up isn't only, educating yourself and empowering yourself, but also being able to share that power with other people and impact the lives of other people.
Well, thanks for leading me, Sam. That's where I should have gone with the next part of this. You're quite right. It helps our democracy if each of us powers up so we can take responsibility for being more than spectators. But given the fact that we've got this fancy thing called the internet now, we actually could share that power up opportunity with every friend and fan that we have, across the country. And if we do that, we might drive ourselves toward a more equitable and citizen-driven society.
Yeah, and I think the key word there that you touched on is spectator. And, in the previous episode with Dr. John Wilson, we spoke about this idea of someone that, doesn't participate and is kind of like in the wings of the political establishment or government or community. And can you define a bit what being a political spectator is and how it has impacted our country?
Well, it's someone with a mental health issue, I think, because if you're a spectator in today's politics, you're looking at a lot of things that can be very stress inducing. Being a spectator is the historical posture of citizens in this country. We broke away from the king, and we decided the new system was we elected representatives who would exercise our power and who we expected to solve all of our problems. But a lot's happened since then. We're about to celebrate our 250th coming up. And, when one person at the founding of this country had a member of Congress representing 30,000 people, today it's over 700,000 people. So you can see the dilution in representative power. We've really, they're much more distant from us. And then what happened was that media came about. And everybody thinks about media today like it's social media and all that stuff. No, I'm talking about radio. Radio came about in the 40s. Lyndon Johnson was the one to first capitalize on it. And it started to mean that people weren't as important anymore as the money that it took to buy media. So again, we got further distance from the power. And as we got further and further distance, and as media became more and more plentiful, politics and government became entertainment, a spectator sport, something that we watched and cheered for one side or the other, didn't really think it impacted us. But that disengagement is coming home to roost right now, and we can see our democracy in peril if we don't learn to come to a higher level of citizenship, one beyond spectator.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like taking into account media and its impact that we've gone arguably from spectator to audience, where you're passively watching a TV show or passively watching a movie and you might like get distracted, not know where the plot is and then come back and like, oh, that happened. Okay, I guess. And we've kind of been led into a place where we're just sitting back with our feet up on the recliner chair, watching everything happen and kind of just being like, I wonder what happens next in this film, without realizing that we have roles within this film, not just as actors, but producers, directors, etc. We all have a position to play in the film or the spectacle that is our country and our democracy.
Yeah, and what's happened over the years is that government has become so much more complex. And when it was founded here in the United States, it was mostly national security. Today, there are a myriad programs. The population has grown dramatically, has become even more diverse. And so the challenges of the day simply can't be met by representatives who are now representing in the House 700,000 citizens. We have to play an active role in bringing solutions to bear and turning the direction of this country away from the kind of celebrity culture that the political culture has become back to a culture of service and solution focus.
And I think that's a perfect segue as to why is the citizen service focused on a government that is citizen driven? What's the impact of having citizens at the steering wheel?
Well, look, we need revolutionary change, to tell you the truth. We have reached the point that we're in real danger of losing our democracy and losing that kind of across the board commitment where everyone respects each other as citizens of this country. And so we need to move to a higher level right now. And that's going to mean a radical a transformation of the distribution of political power in this country. Right now, the power is mostly in the hands of elites, high-ranking political and governmental officials, people with lots of money to be able to influence the elites. And big ideas are coming out of both sides, but often without any thought of what the impact of implementation might be on the regular citizen, especially young citizens who have to have something to look forward to, like a future that is environmentally stable. So right now, we need to bring the power down to the people, and that's not just some sort of a radical civil war or something like that. It's really the power is in our own hands as individuals to, as we said in the beginning, power up. Mm-hmm. Take an hour and a half to just learn about the power that you have. And if you think it's small power because it's just power that you might exercise in your own community, know that your solutions can be shared across the country. We can literally govern from the bottom up if we become citizen driven.
Yeah, and I think for our audience, we've spoken a lot about, taking the training, getting involved, being someone that is an active participant, is no longer a spectator. But how do we encourage people to make that mental shift or almost that emotional shift that's necessary to see themselves as someone that is an active participant?
I think I guess it was Albert Schweitzer, the great humanitarian, who said that example is not the best teacher. It's the only teacher. Mm-hmm. And that's it. We have to exemplify the higher values of citizenship. We have to exemplify in our daily life mutual respect for our fellow citizens. Mm-hmm. When we serve our communities, however small our service might be, it has to be unselfish service for the betterment of the community as a whole and not our own special interests. And if we exemplify those values and maybe take an hour and a half to take the training where you can learn some of the hardball politics and some of the legal rights that go beyond just your right to freedom of speech or association, your right to change your master plan for a better environment or more fair housing, the right to go to the school board and change the discipline policies so that they'll stop being a pipeline to prison, the right to take the reins of power into your own hands, get solutions adopted, and then share those solutions with others. I mean, I can't tell you how much of a relief people will feel if they can switch from the focus on the problems to the focus on the solution. Yeah. Stress goes away, motivation goes up, and we can make a future for ourselves if we do it together.
Yeah, and this definitely sounds like very different from the standard messaging you get from media or, traditional politics where it's very ideological. This sounds more so as a moral shift, as something that stands on morality and values, as opposed to like, this idea is good and this idea is bad and you're dumb and I'm smart. It sounds very much aligning with people despite how we might get there, that we share these common values. We believe that these moral values are necessary in this country. And because we share that, we can come together to solve these problems. And I think that's what stands out very much with what you're proposing, as opposed to some other solutions that, also have merit, but are kind of given to us, especially young people, in a very different kind of way and in a way that can kind of make you feel like you can't be involved, that you're not someone that this is catered to, or you're not someone that can be helpful in this kind of situation.
You're right. It's we, as I said a moment ago, have a political culture that's becoming more a political culture of celebrity, performative and careerism. How do I maintain my career track instead of how do I serve the public and that sort of thing, and becoming more divisive. And this is on both sides, and it's because the leaders can't handle all of the problems, so they have to play act like they're doing. And we need to take some of the burden off of their shoulders. and not wasting our time blaming, just finding pragmatic solutions that don't fall into that ideological talk, talk, talk warfare that gets us nowhere.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of that talk, talk, talk stuff that we often consume very easily and frantically, does the American civic sphere have a disengagement problem, or do we have an uninformed problem? What's the solution there?
We have both. I mean, we're disengaging because we're uninformed. And uninformed doesn't mean we're stupid. It
Mhm.
just means that we haven't, in our schools, in media, in our other public institutions, exposed people to the fact that they have far more power than they ever had when this country was founded. I went through some of the rights a moment ago to really take control of the destiny of their own community, and by sharing solutions, take control of the destiny of the country. So I think that it's really a matter now of making sure that we offer the kind of escape from that ignorance that can allow us to be able to become more of a citizen-driven democracy and avoid the biggest danger that exists right now, and that's disengagement. You know, if you look at the polls and you look at the voting patterns, engagement's starting to fall off, especially among young people and often among minority communities, because they're looking at the political landscape and they're saying, look, nobody's speaking to me, nobody's listening to me. You make promises and promises and nothing happens. And what's the next step? Then a pox on both your houses. I'm not even going to go vote. And as soon as that happens, you're empowering the people who care less about democracy. So you need very much to maintain minimally your engagement in our voting rights, but you need to do a lot more because it's time to make that radical shift away from, the elitist, money-driven politics to a citizen-driven solution politics.
Yeah, and I think that what you just touched on, that it's engagement beyond voting, because I know for a lot of young people, we love to turn out at the polls. We love to turn out when the vote comes around, like recently for a lot of elections the past like 4 to 8 years, it's been young people are turning out in record numbers, and then we're gone until you see us again for midterms or you see us again for a presidential election. And that's a form of disengagement if you're not fully in it. And I think it's not necessary to be someone that makes a career out of politics to be involved in politics. I don't think you have to be someone that, is so well versed that they went to law school and they majored in political science and they know all the theories and the fancy words. I don't think that's necessary either. But I think as people in a community, as people that care about their neighbors, as people that care about themselves, we have a duty to be engaged. And that means we show up to more things in the polling booth. We show up to our school board meetings and we show up to City Hall and, we talk to our neighbors and our friends about there's this issue going on. And I saw in this other town, they solved this issue in this way. And maybe we can, tell our mayor, or tell our city council or our planning board that this solution worked and I think it can work here. And I think that's the level of engagement that if you've never done it before, it sounds super intimidating and it sounds like such a big task to take on. But once you're able to do it, and even if you don't get that win right away, you realize how powerful you are. You realize, oh, my voice is actually more than just like me on Instagram sharing a post or me going to the polling booth and being one of like 3 million that voted. And I think that's where the uninformed aspect of that you mentioned can be really dangerous and can be really impactful to not only our democracy, but also our own civic self-image, our own confidence when it comes to being an active member of a community. We sometimes don't know the power that's there. And that can lead us into a place where we're like, well, if I did engage, what do I even have to offer? Like, what can I even say? I sit down and I'm just one of many faces, and I don't think that's true. And, Harry's mentioned it multiple times, and I'll mention it again because, I believe in beating a dead horse. Go to our website, go to www.thecitizenscampaign.org, register for our course, take, an hour, 45 minutes to complete the course, or take your time, do it over multiple weeks, and realize that you have way, way more power than anybody, than, the political elite or, your school or your mom or whatever other person in your life tells you that you have way more to offer than just your one vote or your multiple votes.
It's that kind of passion that we need, Sam. I've been with a lot of young people coming into our citizen service lately, and they have just wonderful values. They have creative minds with respect to solutions, but without knowing how to, get the power to get those solutions adopted, they're at risk of becoming frustrated. They're at risk of further disengagement, and our democracy is at risk. So you're preaching to people what they need to see is that there is power available to them, and it doesn't take long to take it is a wonderful thing. Very much appreciated.
Yeah. And before we wrap it up, I just want to ask you, for the audience listening, if you're viewing, you can tell that there is a generational gap here, that we are two very different people, two very different,
Only
only a little bit, only a touch. And, I think that you have led a life that has so many lessons in it. And I'm dying to know, and I know the audience is dying to know, what was it in your life that was that switch, that like flicker that turned on, other than the reform school and that beautiful story of, why don't people care about this? What was it that told you, oh, I have to do more than just this? It doesn't stop here.
Her name was Caroline. I married her 56 years ago, and I'm still trying to live up to her values.
Amen. As they say, behind every great man is an even greater woman. So shout out Caroline, saving democracy. Any last words, Harry, before we tell our audience goodbye?
Well, just to remind people that it was the women who stormed the Bastille. So, if we want change, they're the ones that are going to lead the way, and we'll do our best to implement.
Amen. All right. Thank you, everybody. Again, I will say it 100 times. Go take our training. Go to the link in our show notes, and it'll get you there super quick, super easy. It's free, self-paced. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain.
And might I add, you will then become part of a community of people who believe in mutual respect and service to each other. It's a wonderful feeling. So come on and join us.
That's an open invitation, everybody. Thank you so much, Harry, for taking time to speak with us. Thank you, everyone that tuned in. Get engaged, get involved, get off the couch, and click the link in the bio. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great time. Thank you, Harry.
Bye-bye now. Thank you.
Power Up Podcast is brought to you by the Citizens Campaign. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at the Citizens Campaign, or our website, citizenscampaign.org. Power Up Podcast is written, recorded, and edited by Samantha Castro and Cesar Romero. The official music for Power Up Podcast is brought to you by Banks and Nova Future. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week. Stay strong and power up.